Honestly, I don't recall anything besides the Pergamon Museum.
Okay.
Which had left a really strong impression on me because of the altar and just the architecture of it. Not in particular any pieces or something or artifacts, but just visiting the museum island and the architecture, entering that whole sort of island, also conceptually as an island, somehow symbolically as an island. As a kid or teenager, I remember that as somehow a very striking experience. I feel that they were made in a very peculiar and very special moment in my life, as just with the dawning realization of becoming a father. That was one thing, of course, like a life-changing experience somehow, totally unplanned and unexpected. But so that was sort of the last moment before that, fact. And the little one being born in the studio, and I felt that gave some sort of extra focus or some attention to the works I was working on, but also it generally, and going away from that sort of coincidence somehow with that development, I feel that I was I was working before that on a larger series of small-scale works, where I normally feel that I normally actually work on small-scale and larger-scale paintings at the same time, because I feel they can really inform and inspire each other because of the different approaches you have to take to them and the different scale you have to deal with, and I feel it is sometimes a relief to go bigger somehow, because you have a natural sort of openness of the material, of the object, as a painting somehow in a larger scale work, which is beneficial to my understanding of a painting somehow, because I'm not interested in closure or sort of like a pictorial sort of a scene, but rather than the sort of enabling the painting to talk to its environment and to open up somehow. Even though now in these paintings there's much more going on somehow in the paintings, I feel that I've never tried, or I try never to lose track of this sort of gate. Yeah, I always work on different paintings because it is like a challenge for me somehow to not jump literally, but somehow, the solution for a riddle in one of the paintings lies maybe in the other. So it's just like a constant sort of cryptological sort of exercise somehow. And if you go into that, then the more riddles you face, the more confusing it is, but the more challenging it is, and the more I, at least, are motivated and sort of sucked into it. So I feel it gives me the most, or deepest sort of, if you talk about deep dreaming or something, that is my REM phase somehow I can enter. And if you dream of many things at once. It's not always just one situation you dream. Maybe you dream about one situation, but you can see it simultaneously from 15 different angles. And that's kind of what I feel enables me, to enter that phase in my painting process, the REM phase, by working on many works at the same time. In sort of the core of the medium of painting lies for me an interest, or that is a natural sort of pretext for being a painter, is the curiosity to experiment. So that, thinking about Polke or some other painters I really admire, Polke called himself, I think, an alchemist too, and it has something of that, where you just start mixing things up and see what happens. I think that using or utilizing the robot, or the vacuum cleaner robot, was interesting to me in many ways, but specifically as it is kind of like a really dumb version of a robot. It has only a certain amount of actions or commands it can follow. One of them is the circle, and but still it sort of follows a certain rhythm of algorithms, or pattern of algorithms to fulfill these commands. And so I used my former house cleaner to actually become my studio assistant to some extent, by filling the mop tank with pigment, Indian ink, and then Basically, that's something I have to mention because I buy like folded canvas blankets, and once you unfold them, they still, of course, have all their folds and all the wrinkles. And I basically use the robot to draw a blue circle on top or in the center of the canvas, and as such, sort of kind of inscribing its current state, like the wrinkly state of its packed existence into the canvas, because it's kind of like a schraffur, or somehow to some way the robot did, or like inscribed into the canvas. And then even after priming it, even after stretching it, these wrinkles are like part of the work and sort of the first sort of memorandum, or some sort of like memory of its former self, sort of, which is the first layer of the work, or becomes then the first layer of the work too. I never used an easel, even in the classical academy of Düsseldorf. I never had one. There were a lot of ones, but they were more like gravestones. Nobody painted on them. Like there was one room filled with easels, unused. Anyways, but yes, I work very free somehow between the floor and the wall, but ultimately towards the end it's more on the wall than on the floor, because I need a certain kind of distance to the piece in order to, read it basically and make decisions and go in and out somehow. I mean, I think that the why I became a painter and why I became an artist is to tell stories without telling stories, in a way, so to say something without language, to invent my own language to say something, to express feelings in an ever-evolving language, like that's the beauty of art and the beauty of painting, and specifically I feel, which is most natural to me, but I think that's sort of, it's kind of like an existential philosophy, if you want so to say or call it like that, written in your own language, and of course you reduce that power if you aim to tell a specific story and expect that story to be read by everyone in the same way. So I think the larger and the more abstract, it's not about a story. An abstract painting tells a story too. It's just the way you start to read and speak about painting and art. But it's about the abstract quality of the work. And the larger and the more abstract and the more powerful it is, I feel. And the less timeless, or the more timeless, the piece becomes. I feel like titles, they can be a pretext, or they can be an explanation, or they can be sort of just a part of the work somehow. And I'm not interested to explain anything using a title or misusing a title in that sense, but I'm rather like may just add or give a context to understand or have access to the work. But like you mentioned humor, and I think humor is apparent in my work and a very important aspect of it, and I think it falls short in many in many ways in contemporary art, with a few exceptions. But I feel specifically in painting, I feel it's quite difficult to achieve a certain humor without falling short and turning it into a joke or something. So it's a slight sort of, it's a difficult sort of path to walk on, I feel. But the titles can certainly help to help you, like a rail or some sort of, to not have it fall to one or the other side. I think what is funny about attaching like a sentence or word to a painting, going back to the previous question, talking about abstract qualities of painting and art making, and then attaching a sentence in the given language, like mostly English or German, is kind of absurd because in itself somehow, but I even like that, and I feel it has a certain quality of humor in itself that we do that somehow, almost like a passport or like an ID or some sort of like a document actually we assert to a certain kind of work. But then I feel even more encouraged to find a way to like subvert or like kind of like undermine sort of the official sort of like quality somehow of that title, but I just like, I'm thinking like a mantra of this, it's only a part of a title of some of these works, but like I think I came up with something like speaking Sanskrit with a German accent, and I think just this fragment of a title already tells, I think, how I sort of deal and sort of want to utilize the power of you know, entitling. You know, when I as far as I can think back, like I was drawing somehow. That was my mode of communication, even before I was able to speak. And it's similar with most of us, I would say. Like you know, that's the first primal sort of instinct of communication, is like taking a pen or like you know, taking our own shit and smear it somewhere and create, like try to express ourselves. And I feel that I always felt like very much in harmony with that way of communicating, and that extended somehow. So early on I realized that when I like understood the concept and the existence of artists and artwork, I was 100% like determined to become one myself. And it was a long road to actually feel that I sort of got close to it, but I started in Düsseldorf eventually, like 14 years ago, and I was, because it took me such a long time to get there, I was kind of exploding or imploding, and it was like a dam which broke, and I kind of was only painting day and night in the academy. I just lived there, and so I was totally immersed and like drunken of painting. And but to one hand, like on the one hand, even before that whole experience, I was able to sort of study media design in Berlin while I wasn't accepted to art school. Actually, I had the idea to do something useful, and I did study. Basically, I learned there like all the programs and all this sort of, you know, it was the bubble, actually, the new economy bubble. And so I was sort of introduced to freehand and Photoshop early on, and I kind of, you know, understood them as creative tools, which they are. And I think that was played an important part to that moment later on, when I discovered like filmmaking and other like, you know, technological materials to express myself, which actually happened. That moment was another crucial moment, was when I went to Skowhegan in Maine, in north of New York, which is a residency, but ultimately it's just, to boil it down, 3 months with 60 other young artists from all over the world, and they feed you peanut butter and good studio visits. And for me, for many people, everyone does whatever they, you know, launch for, but I just started filming. I borrowed the camera, and I actually destroyed one there by filming the sun, which was one of my first videos. But I like just in general, I feel this moment sort of allowed me to step back from my just, you know, this on one hand this fascination, but also this obsession with painting, and rethink myself, and sort of that's what residencies I think can offer you. And then I started, you know, really understanding painting as a foundation or as a scaffold somehow to sort of expand my practice and sort of experiment on that scaffold with the painter's mind. I didn't felt like a total stranger to all these things, you know, video editing or like programming. I had like a little insight before, and it felt really easy to reconnect to these things. And then, you know, one thing led to the other. I just have a constant like interest in, you know, new technologies and programming, software, or like filmmaking, time-based media, and so that's sort of. But painting always, you know, that decision somehow was super important, to not abandon painting, but basically make it my, you know, sort of like foundation for other artist explorations. And I always also feel that painting has the strengths and quality, and also it can become, or it became already, sort of my gravity in, you know, in acting, in, you know, in the internet, or like expanding my work into the digital sphere, basically. This is sort of like a festival of like windows, in a way, that it depicts so many scenes, or like juxtaposes so many scenes, that that sort of the architecture of it is of course like an homage to the understanding of or like our exploration and maneuverability into the digital sphere, or like how we use and engage with it. But the motifs somehow, specifically in these sort of almost folded letters or something, they actually stem from a different source. It's more like an homage to Dostoevsky actually. Which you can read in PDF form too, actually. But so that's sort of like my tribute to my constant obsession with Dostoevsky and his power of imagination and storytelling and humor, actually. Yes, definitely. I mean, I was really early adopter of every sort of gaming console which came out back then as a child. So I had the Game Boy, and I played even on the, the Atari and Commodore with the friends. I never had my own. My parents wouldn't allow us, but I was spending a lot of time with my friends playing these early games, and that was a striking visual experience, as a kid, to experience a computer game and the power it had on you, even with the limited possibilities these games had, or even like a 2D game, just feeling that sort of, this sort of perspective somehow, and that sort of overwhelming sort of energy sort of taking over, putting you in a seat and taking you along somehow. That was like a super intense memory I have, thinking about the earliest, or some of the earliest experiences I had with computer games. I mean, the art plays a crucial role in that, anyways, because art can offer different perspectives on things, and also offer different perspectives on new technologies and how we can use them, and that might not be most economic, or that might not be most logical, but in the end that will just maybe lead to total different understandings of technology and a total different mindset or consciousness somehow. And I feel that's where art is super important somehow, in specifically in the idea of advancing, or the idea of progress somehow as humankind somehow. And so I feel that VR can play a crucial part in that, if we understand somehow the true potential of it somehow.